Hello, and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And I'm Meg Hofdahl.
And today we're talking about Stir of Echoes. This came out 20 years ago, and I never saw it, but also we're old.
Yes, we are old. Newsflash. I have seen it. I did see it when I was in I was in my mom's uterus, just kidding. I was I was in high school, and it was like, oh, have you heard of Stir of Echo? That's so good. You have to see it. And I watched it at my friend's house with like a couple people, I think, like a sleepover movie. So, yeah.
That's fun. Well, somebody named David Koepp wrote and directed it. It was based on the novel by Richard Matheson, though. And it's 67% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Have you read the novel?
No, and I was surprised when I saw that because I had no idea that it was based on a Richard Matheson book. I can't remember exactly when I picked up my first Richard Matheson book. It was when I was old, or probably in my 20s. But he's known for writing like I Am Legend, and he was a lot of his work was, I believe, adapted for Twilight Zone episodes. I don't know if he actually wrote any original Twilight Zone episodes. I'd have to look into that. I'm gonna search that after I search. I'm searching David Koepp, right?
PP.
Oh, okay, PP. Okay, because that sounds really familiar. Like he's done lots, but maybe I'm just losing it.
So Kevin Bacon's in this movie, and I don't know if you remember. I mean, you do, but do you remember that show, The Following? And the first season was so good. Like, I really loved it. And it was like the murders were based on like Edgar Allan Poe or something, right? It was cool, but then it sort of went downhill, I think.
Yeah, that was what, maybe about 10 years ago or so? Was it that long ago? Maybe not quite, but yeah, it was one of those shows. Some of those shows need to just use that model, like that sort of Asian model of just having one season. I think that was the perfect example, because I think we both gave up in the second season. So, but the first season of that show, and of course the whole Edgar Allan Poe element, is what I liked about it. So that was a creepy show. I wonder if you can stream it anywhere. It'd be worth. And I feel like also the first season you could just watch that, and it's sort of like a mini series or something.
Yeah, it definitely works on its own. I remember, I mean, the whole tone of it was good. The plot twists, which I won't give away here. The bad guy was great. Kevin Bacon's character was really interesting. The music, just everything, the atmosphere that they created, I was on board. And then they kind of figured like, oh, well, we have to recreate what we did in the first season. It could have ended, but if there's a cash cow, they're going to have a season 2.
Oh, definitely. That's the American way. So I looked up David Koepp. Yeah, he wrote Jurassic Park, and which another adaptation. He wrote the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. I knew his name, like it sort of pinged in my head. He wrote Ghost Town, which is, I think, a really underrated Ricky Gervais movie. I love that movie. And he also wrote the Bomb Mummy from like 2 years ago.
Oh, interesting. Now, this movie, it has this hypnotism element, and we actually talk about hypnotism and the science behind it in our upcoming book, The Science of Monsters, and we're talking about it in our chapter on Get Out, because, of course, there's hypnotism in that. But have you ever been hypnotized? I don't remember if I've asked you.
No, and like the concept to me makes me so uncomfortable. I would never, even like for a party situation, maybe it's because I saw this movie when I was a teenager, but I don't know. The idea of being hypnotized, I don't know if, I want to say I don't know if it's true, but after doing research for the book, I actually was more believing that it's something that could happen to you and that you can be hypnotized, because part of me just has like a skepticism, but then part of me is like scared shitless about it.
So there was always this big show when I was growing up. Every summer, this hypnotist would come and sell out the local amphitheater. So it was like, I don't know, hundreds of seats at least. And then people would be sitting on the grass and bringing their lawn chairs because everyone loved this hypnotist. And I was always just like, oh, these are actors or they're plants or they're fakes. But then this woman from our church who is, I mean, as straight as they come, like she wouldn't lie about anything. She got hypnotized and, claimed she didn't remember anything. It's like I don't think she would lie. And I was like, well, wait a minute. So I don't know. I've never been hypnotized, although, I've never tried either. And I don't think I would like to.
And here's like an odd thing. What if we don't know that we've been hypnotized? Like that's what creeps me out. I don't like this idea that because when I was doing research, I was finding these people who were doing it to people without their knowledge, and they were kind of like selling it as like I'm gonna help you relax a little bit. And so it just creeps me out to think you could be hypnotized and like you have missing memory and oh I don't like it.
Well, like in Get Out, he's being hypnotized to quote unquote like give up smoking, and he really does, but there's a lot of other elements she's implanting.
Yeah, it's definitely not worth it. I think it's interesting in this movie how he is the cipher, so to speak, and of course they sort of explain it through the hypnotism, but how he is the one who's sort of closer to the realm of spirits, because I think that's something that's traditionally female or for children.
And I wrote down, I feel like this character, Kevin Bacon's character, is representing a lot of the elements of the female gothic that we're talking about in our second book, where they're not being believed, or they're like you said, closer to the spirits. And so I feel like this is typically a female part, and it's a male in this movie.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And one thing I also liked that we don't get to see very often, I feel like, is the sort of demographic of this family. Is they're very much a like working class family, and I thought they did a really good job in the movie of like showcasing them, making them believable characters, likable characters. They weren't like caricatures or stereotypes, I felt, but we still got to like kind of be in a world that we don't really get to be in the movies very often.
I agree, and I think they were relatable. Oh, one little factoid that they said, I don't know if this is true or not, but they say in the movie that 8% of people can be hypnotized. So I thought that was interesting. This baby monitor conceit is so scary. Like if you are listening to your baby monitor and you hear something that you shouldn't hear, like they're talking to somebody, which I think is what, is happening in the movie, or you hear somebody talking to them, or just you hear something wrong. That's so scary. Did you ever hear anything weird on your baby monitor? I think we've talked about this before, but I mean, that's terrifying.
It is, and I feel like a lot of times as a creator of horror, I get really like annoyed because I've complained about before, I don't like having to deal with cell phones. It kind of breaks the intensity of what's happening. But this is a great example of using technology to your advantage and like how it can actually make things creepier. Like I was just watching a thing on ID because, I love true crime, and they showed this. It was footage, like CCTV footage, but literally you could see this woman's body in the back of a guy's pickup truck, and just seeing it on this grainy, and it was real, and seeing it on this like grainy CCTV, like it made me react so hard. And it's just sort of an interesting sort of concept that technology can actually make things creepier, because we're always like in Victorian houses and stuff, but actually things can be even scarier now.
It's true. I think the ghost stuff is well done in this movie, and it's actually scary compared to, I think The Haunting came out at the same time, the same year, and that was so CGI that it wasn't even scary to me. It took me out of the movie. This ghost stuff was actually pretty cool.
That's a good point. I didn't really think about comparing them, but yeah, think of the budget of The Haunting. I mean, it was probably 5 times as much, but you're right. It's sort of like, it sort of makes sense too, where it's like we are in this sort of working class neighborhood, and also the budget's stripped down, and so it's like we get sort of the more old fashioned scares. And I also thought like even the hypnotism where they were showing him like what it was like in his head, I thought that was even kind of creepy.
Yeah, it was totally well done. Okay, so speaking of this house that they're in, and we're like you were saying, we're normally in a Victorian Gothic sort of setting. This is just a house in Chicago. He says it costs them $800 a month to live. Like, okay, 20 years later, I mean, that seems like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I'm sure people in Chicago would have a good laugh about that.
But let me just tell you, if I had a house where I had to climb down a ladder to light a pilot light, like in order to get things like the electricity going or whatever, there's no way I would ever do it, and I think I would move. Like that was creepy AF.
That was really creepy. That was a really good use of old, well, like I was saying, old houses. I mean, yeah, I would never personally go down there. I think we all know that.
And so the thing about Kevin Bacon in this part, he's not necessarily likable, and he doesn't have many redeeming qualities. Like, I mean, he's real, but I think that that's an interesting character to follow too, because he's not this perfect person. We always talk about that. Like, that's not interesting. He's maybe not even likable, but we're following him and we're empathizing with him.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at the very beginning of the movie is him finding out they're having another baby, and he's not thrilled about it. So, you know, that's almost like, oh boy, that could be the villain or the guy who gets killed right away, or, you know. So I would be curious to read the novel, because I bet you he's even more complex and interesting in that, and it would be interesting to see sort of how much they took into the movie. Because yeah, that's true. I mean, but the thing is, I came away with it feeling like I like him.
Okay.
So maybe he's not likable, like if you were like doing a tally of things that are likable, but there was something about him that made me care.
You were rooting for him.
Yeah.
It's never a good sign in any movie or in life, I think, if someone starts digging holes in their basement or in their backyard. Like, that's just not a good sign, right? I mean, just like because they're trying to find something or do, it's probably not a good sign.
Yeah, it's sort of like the whole like all work no play makes Jack a dull boy, because it's like doing anything like repeatedly and sort of like in this manic state. That's something you see a lot. That's like a trope. And it tends, I feel like we see men do it a lot. And also this idea of like their emotions, their anger specifically gets away from them, where it's like all of a sudden they're sort of yelling at kids when they wouldn't normally, and like they are grabbing their wife a little too hard, or they're digging holes a little too hard. And so that seems to be something that comes up in horror movies. And it is creepy, because it's like, I think there's that societal idea of like the man of the house is like supposed to keep everything under control, and like as we were doing research, often it's the woman who's like quote unquote hysterical. So there's this sort of like unsafe feeling when the man of the house starts to lose it, so to speak, and his emotions are completely out of check.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting dynamic to play with. When they think he's okay, or he tells everybody that it's okay, but then they show that the entire kitchen is torn up. What would you do if you came home and Luke had torn up the entire kitchen?
I'm picturing him in there with a chainsaw. I mean, he wanted to have a conversation about scheduling haircuts earlier, and I didn't want to do that. So you could probably imagine if the whole kitchen was torn up.
You know, his digging isn't in vain, though. There is a body behind the bricks, and the whole backstory is that these fathers are trying to protect their sons, because they ended up killing this girl by accident, right? Like, if I'm remembering. And so I was thinking, is this going to be the rare happy ending where a ghost is actually let free and nothing else happens? Because it seems like every time they let a ghost free in horror movies, they're not really set free, or they're coming back to do something else.
See, yeah. So, well, one thing I'll say, I don't think they killed her by accident necessarily,
yeah.
but I mean they killed her, and I guess that probably wasn't their intention, but they're still assholes. And it was kind of interesting because we get to sort of see it from her perspective, and it was that actress Jennifer Morrison, which I didn't remember. But what I was gonna say was, I felt like this movie really set up The Ring really well, because it's like I had seen this a couple years before, and so I think in The Ring, like many, I was sort of lulled into like, oh, now the ghost is okay and she's free. And so I think this another trope where, and I guess like in The Changeling, is that the one where the ghost like starts being an asshole too? So yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back and forth, but this one it seems like she was happy.
Yeah. And I said, I don't remember exactly what happened at the end, but I said, well, that wasn't really a happy ending, but the ghost was set free. Do you remember how it ended? I can't remember, but
Yeah, I mean, and that's one complaint I have with this movie. When I told Luke, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna watch Stir of Echoes." He's like, "Oh, that's a really forgettable movie," and I'm like, "Yeah." And at the end of the day, I guess it is a little forgettable. Like I feel like it was decent, but I can't even remember. I didn't watch it that long ago, and like parts of it are already starting to sort of melt away from my mind. So it had its good moments, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty hazy on it.
so the last thing I wrote is that, this father sort of losing his mind and all of that business, it did remind me of The Shining, and that reminded me of my excitement for November and Doctor Sleep. And I know we've already talked about the trailer on the podcast, but I am so ready. And Ewan McGregor as grown-up Danny Torrance, like, what is this universe we are living in?
I was getting my hair done today, and that's when I like catch up on my Us magazine, People magazines, of course. And there was a picture of Ewan McGregor in there just lacing up his skates because he was taking his kids skating or something. That man is so cute. And I'm like, oh my God, he's just, look at him. He's just like us. But I'm so excited. I'm so excited that Mike Flanagan's behind it. I mean, I could just gush about it all day long. I know it's going to be amazing. And maybe I'm setting myself up for disappointment, but I just know I'm going to love it.
So the other thing I am excited for, that's going to be coming out, I mean, I think they're filming right now, is the second season of Castle Rock, because it's going to be based on Misery. And remember, what's her name from Masters of Sex?
Lizzie Kaplan.
Yeah, Lizzie Kaplan is the lead. So, I'm going to get back on board.
Yeah, my mom was watching it the first season, and I told her that both you and I kind of quit around the same time, and she's like, "What?" I need to like circle back and see if she made it through and what she thinks, because we really got to get back into Castle Rock. What's wrong with us?
I know, and life is busy, and sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day to catch up on everything. But yeah, that's something we have to do. Well, before we go off the rails too far, we need to rank Stir of Echoes. Do you want to say anything else about that movie though, before we rank it? Do you love Kevin Bacon?
Of course, Kevin Bacon. I love your blonde hair. I love you in Tremors. I love your cowboy hat in Tremors, and I think that you are great.
He's still married to Kira Sedgwick, right?
And that's so cute. And I read once that like they always take turns working so that they're never working at the same time. And I was like, that's so nice. They just seem like a nice married couple. I don't want them to break up. And apparently they like lost a bunch of money in some like money scam a couple years ago, but they got through it. Aww. But I mean, I'm not gonna say I'm in love with Kevin Bacon now. I mean, he doesn't have like Carrie Elwes staying power or anything, but I will always forever love him in Tremors.
Or Ewan McGregor staying power? Like, my God, that man.
He drank from like the immortal fountain or something. I don't know. I want to know the secret.
Okay, let's rank Stir of Echoes on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being you think it's a perfect movie. What should our scale be? What stands out for you? I mean, I think about that red flashing light, when they're going out for their night, and they just like would go over and like drink with the neighbors and stuff. That was kind of funny, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of liked it because it was sort of like real, and we didn't talk about her much, but I feel like she was like a very real person. Like even her outfits and just like the way she swore. I don't know. There was just something about her. I just felt like she was real.
And it was there very like late 90s, Yeah. Everything was just there. So how about like red flashing lights? Is that okay? How many red flashing lights do you give Stir of Echoes?
I'm gonna give it 6.5. I think it's good. There are decent performances. I like I said, I like her. I like him. It kept my interest. I didn't feel like I was going on my phone a lot, but at the same time, there's just something about it. It just feels like really light and airy to the point where I don't even remember it, you know?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm going to give it a 6. It also didn't blow me away. It didn't stand out to me as like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't see this, and I'm going to go back and rewatch it immediately. Like, I've seen it now and I know what it is, and I mean, it was decent, but I didn't love it.
Yeah, agreed.
What else do you want to talk about in the world of horror? Coming up so soon is It Chapter 2. Meg, on a scale of 0 to 10, how excited are you for this movie?
10,001 Pennywises. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so excited too. And the second trailer dropped at the end of July and showing more of the grown-up characters. James McAvoy, when he touches his temple as Professor whoever, what is his name? Professor, I mean, I don't, okay, is he Professor X? I just see, everything went out of my mind when he touches his temple. That man.
And might I add, he's like extremely talented too. Like, he's a very good actor. I mean,
I am obviously.
Kelly, let's stop. I'm trying to keep this podcast professional. We don't want to make men feel like we're, yeah, I always think about that when I see him, about how you do the impression of like him putting his fingers to his temple, because it's just like, it's a turn on. What can we say?
We talked about not wanting to get hypnotized, but he could like hypnotize me or read my mind or whatever he does when he does that. Like, I don't care.
We've thrown it all out the window. Hypnotize me, Professor X.
I know he's not hypnotizing people. Oh boy. Anyway, so I'm excited about that. We love Bill Hader too.
Oh, I love Bill Hader. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law keep insisting that Luke looks like Bill Hader, and I don't get it.
He doesn't, I'm sorry.
No, I know. But now every time I see him, I'm like looking for that. No, I love Bill Hader. And I think that the cast is really well done. Like, especially Bill Hader. Like, I feel like that was perfect. So I know I'm going to try to think of another word instead of excited. I'm just my body is ready for It Chapter 2. And the first one was really good, but I feel like this one's going to be even better. We get to like the adult aspect of it, I think, was probably my favorite part. I loved the nostalgia thing in the novel. Of course, the novel is set different years, and those particular years were not nostalgic for me, but I love the kid aspect in the Losers Club. But I think there's something about the adults and then sort of the feelings from long ago coming back and everything that I really am looking forward to.
I think it's going to be so good. And, for some reason, It and Pennywise really struck a chord with people. I mean, I think has always. But when this movie came out, the first one, it was such a phenomenon. And I mean, people love this. I feel like, I don't know why we're always defending the horror genre, because obviously it makes money, but I feel like it's brought it into the mainstream or something.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about it in particular. I think there's like a couple things. I think that clowns, for whatever reason, scare us. Like, I think we need to I don't think we've written about that in any of our books, but I'd love to do research on like, what is it about clowns? Because I know Dexter, even just the other day at the parade, like, he did not want to be anywhere near clowns. Like, he just physically cannot handle it. And he's not alone. A lot of people feel that way about clowns. So what is it about clowns? I want to do a scientific study on that. And then I think that the 1990 It was really profoundly important to a lot of people. There's so many people who saw it who are not horror fans for whatever reason, maybe because it was on television.
And it was ABC and it was appointment television at the time when not everybody had a ton of channels, and nobody had like these streaming options, of course. It was on the weeknights when your family was home together. You weren't probably renting videos on those nights. And so it was like, oh, we're going to watch this miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it that way and watching, well, even like the Shining, the when they did the miniseries version with Steven Weber, like I remember like watching that with the whole family, like that's what you did. It's so different now than my kids just watching YouTube videos all the time, but anyway, I think for some reason that was like really inculcated into our culture, and so people were just ready for it, I guess.
Yeah. And so when I think about my fear of clowns, I definitely saw Poltergeist when I was younger than I should have seen it probably, but that clown doll, and it's not even like necessarily evil or scary, but for some reason that clown doll in the original Poltergeist really scared me, and I didn't want, like, I had a clown doll, and like after that movie I got rid of it because it was like creepy.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, like what is it about clowns? It's like this sort of like they're human but they're not, and it's like they're covering up just the slightest bit of themselves, and maybe it's like the fake, this sort of like pseudo happiness, or like this constant glee, and they like don't quit with it, or there's just some sort of like thing that I think it's to everybody, because I wouldn't say like I have a fear of clowns or anything, but they make me like ugh, so. But then there are people who go to, like, my mom's friend when I was growing up, like went to clown school, and she got everything and was like, she was a clown. And I remember even at the time being like 8 years old and thinking, why are you doing that? But then there are people who love it. I don't know. I don't know.
I know people in the theater community who are clowning professionally. Like I know somebody in Cirque du Soleil in a show. He's a clown in Beatles Love, and he's amazing. That doesn't scare me, but certain clowns do. Oh, a celebrity that went to clowning school?
No.
One of the Property Brothers.
Oh God, that makes so much sense, doesn't it?
I remember telling our friend who really loves the Property Brothers, I said, like, did you know one of them went to clowning school? And she's like, oh God, that makes me love him more. And then I told another friend who loves the Property Brothers, and she's like, oh God, I can't love him anymore. So like people have very different reactions.
See, it is. It's very divisive. Maybe it's John Wayne Gacy. Maybe everybody loved clowns. Maybe it's John Wayne Gacy. And it was just like, after that, the thought of like him having all those men's bodies like in his crawl space, and knowing that he was going around on the weekends being a clown, maybe that's what it was.
You know what? It's going to be a chapter in one of our upcoming books. We're absolutely going to get to the bottom of this, and John Wayne Gacy will definitely be a part of that. This is fascinating. We've opened a can of worms, and I don't mean the kind that pop out.
Bazinga. That's not a clown. I've never seen that show. Are they clowns?
A Big Bang Theory references for people who've never seen an episode. Oh boy. Yeah, well, I'm still excited for the movie. I just cannot wait. Oh, so we hope that you are having a wonderful end of your summer. I hate to say that because I mean technically like calendar summer is still there's like a month, but people are going back to school. You know what? I saw somebody post like in the middle of July her kids' first day of school pictures. I think they live in California or Colorado or somewhere. They went back to school in the middle of July.
Yeah, actually, when I was getting my hair done today, there was an 8-year-old next to me, and it's her first day of school, or she said it was her first day of school in July, and they have a like all year school here where they do that. It's just one of the schools here, but I just can't imagine a first day of school in July knowing that all the other kids are at the swimming pool. Like I couldn't do it.
I know. And I was complaining because before 4th of July, there were already school supplies out. But that's why, because some kids are back in school at that time. So who am I to judge?
Well, and I realized that school is like on an agrarian calendar or something, and like my kids are definitely not plowing any fields or anything, or even really picking up anything or doing anything. So they could be in school, but I don't know. I think it's just like a cultural thing. It's just like summer equals no school, right?
Yeah. So wherever you're doing, whether you're in school or plowing the fields. We hope that you are getting in some time for some wonderful horror. And until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.